USPAP, page 240. Appraisal development, client issues. Number 120. Can an appraisal management company be the client? Question. I received an appraisal order from an appraisal management company, AMC, that has requested to be identified as the client in the appraisal report. The AMC will not provide its client's name. Does USPAP allow me to identify the AMC as the client if the AMC will not disclose the name of its client? Response. There is nothing in USPAP that precludes an AMC from being a client. However, appraisers must comply with all applicable assignment conditions. Assignment conditions required by some users of appraisal services, including those prepared for federally regulated financial institutions, specify who the client must be. Therefore, the AMC may be the client under USPAP, but there could be additional applicable assignment conditions depending on the intended use and intended users. Having an AMC as the client can be similar to the situation in which an appraiser is engaged by an attorney. The identity of the party that engaged the attorney may not be made available to the appraiser, but USPAP does not preclude the appraiser from naming the attorney as the client. Number 121. Client cannot be identified. Question. I was recently asked to perform a real property appraisal assignment, but the individual that contacted my firm was not the client and indicated that the client could not be identified. Can I accept this assignment and comply with USPAP? Response. No. Standards Rule 1-2 states in part, in developing a real property appraisal, an appraiser must A. Identify the client and other intended users. This does not preclude a third party acting as an agent for the client from ordering the appraisal. In all assignments, the appraiser must know the identity of the client in order to proceed. However, the appraiser is not required to disclose the identity of the client in the appraisal report. See Advisory Opinion 36. Identification and disclosure of client, intended use and intended users for further clarification. Number 122. 122. Subsequent user requests a reliance? I think that's how you say that. Letter. Reliance. Yeah, reliance letter. Question. I delivered an appraisal report to my client. A week later, an entity other than one of the identified intended users contacted me and asked that I provide a reliance letter enabling them to rely on the appraisal report for their own investment use. My client says that they have no problem with me doing that. Can I provide this entity with such a letter even though I had not originally identified them as an intended user? Response: no, you cannot add what is in effect a new intended user after the completion of an assignment, no matter what terminology you use. USPAP defines intended user as the client and any other party as identified by name or type as users of the appraisal or appraisal review report by the appraiser based on communication with the client at the time of the assignment. Bold, added for emphasis. Page 241. The proper way to handle this is to initiate a new assignment with this entity as the client and provide them an appraisal, being careful to develop an appropriate scope of work consistent with the intended use of the new intended users. The new assignment could be based on virtually the same data and analysis, and the value conclusion might be the same. However, in the new assignment, you must consider the assignment elements most appropriate to the scope of work for the new client, intended users, and intended use for the assignment results, which could well be different from those of your original client. Number 123. Readdress or transfer. Question: is it acceptable to readdress or transfer a completed appraisal report? Response: no. Once a report has been prepared by a named client or clients, the appraiser cannot readdress or transfer the report to another party. Simply changing the client name on the report cannot change or replace the original appraiser-client relationship. Therefore, this action is misleading. However, you can consider the request as a new assignment. In so doing, you may establish a new appraiser-client relationship and appraise the property for this new client. Additional information can be found in Appraiser Opinion 26. Readdressing, transferring a report to another party. Important considerations such as the handling of confidential information and other factors are addressed in Advisory Opinion 27. Appraising the same property for a new client. Number 124. Readdressing with lender release. Question: I am aware of two advisory opinions. Advisory opinion number 26, readdressing, transferring a report to another party. And advisory opinion number 27, appraising the same property for a new client. Does that guidance still apply if lender A releases me to perform another assignment? Or can I just readdress the report to lender B since I have obtained a release? Response: yes. The guidance still applies. It is never permissible to readdress a report by simply changing the client's name on a completed report, regardless of whether the first client gave a release. The request from lender B must be treated as a new assignment. Further guidance can be found in the obtaining a release section of Advisory Opinion 27, appraising the same property for a new client. Number 125, identification of intended users. I know that it is my responsibility to identify the intended users when I perform an assignment, and that USPAP defines intended user as the client and any other party as identified by name or type as users of the appraisal or appraisal review report by the appraiser based on communication with the client. However, I need clarification regarding whether certain parties should automatically be considered intended users in certain circumstances described below. Question number 1. If I perform an appraisal for estate tax purposes and the client will provide my report to the IRS with her tax return, must the IRS be identified as an intended user in this situation?